Okay, welcome everyone to the curriculum meeting for July 29th. We are here today to get a firsthand look at some of our social studies lessons that have been planned by our instructional coaches for the county. I would like to officially call this curriculum meeting to order, and I need an approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we'll jump right into it. The only thing on the agenda is are the curriculum updates, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Breedlove.
Thank you all very much. I know it hasn't been a whole lot of time since the last time we met, but I do thank board members for agreeing to meet this evening. Also want to thank our instructional coaches and teachers that did just a tremendous job of working on an extensive amount of social studies new standards this year. As you all know, the unpacking documents and the information came late to our teams, but just speaks volumes for our teams by if you see the amount of work that they did. It's just tremendous work. So I do want to recognize, and I know you all do too, that team for putting this together this evening. So rather than going through every unit and every grade level, I know that you've had a chance to look through the standards at this point. So I would just I've got Dr. Rogers and of course some instructional coaches here that if we get in deep into the individual questions about activities and that these individuals will be able to answer those levels of questions. But so at this time, I'm just going to open the floor to maybe starting a Q&A.
Yeah, and Dr. Houlihan and I just discussed we might want to start, maybe break it up into three parts. We'll start, maybe open it up and start with K-5. And then do Q&A, and then when we feel like K-5, we've asked all of our questions, then we'll move to middle school, 6, 7, 8, and then we'll move to high school if that's okay. So if you want to start with K-5, I don't know if you have a K-5 presentation or if we just go straight into questions.
We'll just
go, comments.
Yes, ma'am. Our plan was to just kind of go into questions, comments about the standards and that. So we'll start with elementary.
Okay, so I'll kick it off. As I was talking to the instructional coaches before the meeting, I just want to say how incredibly impressed I am. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is just the first grading period, or so when students come back, I could not be more impressed with especially the K through 5. I went kindergarten all the way through each one, opened up every link, every assignment, every lesson, activity, and kudos for all of this information that you have put together for the first grading period. My number one question that I have, for parents, I think in our last meeting, Ms. Casey Rimmer did a great job on explaining step by step how parents can go onto the parent part of our UCPS website and create their own accounts. Mm-hmm. So they're not logging time on their students' accounts, and that they can, have their own usernames and passwords and be able to follow this. So when I was going through and clicking on all of the assignments and links and, looking at all of the vocabulary words, I don't know if that's something that each of you looked at, but I paid special attention to the vocabulary words that were going to be addressed the first grading period. And everything looked great. I learned a lot. It was a long time ago since I was in K through 5. So I actually left a bunch of tabs open so I could go back and learn a little bit more. So what I walked away with, if I were a parent, my children have graduated from Union County Public Schools. So if I had a K through 5 parent in school today looking at this, my number one question is how do I get a Mayan username and password? Because I don't have Mayan. So that is the one thing I was not able to look at when I was going through this. So I just wondered if you had any feedback, or if they know how do parents get access to Mayan without, using their student's username and password. Do they just create their own, or are we going to provide that also?
I do not know that answer. I've not heard of parents getting their own Mayan username and password, but I certainly will go back and ask if that is available, and I'll be glad to ask that question and what it would take to do that. We would provide, obviously, the solution is to use the student's username and password, but I understand why a parent may want their own.
Absolutely. I know I would.
Mhm.
I would if I had students in the system now. And I know that we have books and brackets for our third graders, and I know our fourth and fifth graders, because they've moved forward, we've included them on our celebrations. But I don't think it would be fair to the student. I don't know how they record their minutes on Mayan or their reading minutes or whatever, but I think it's going to be important that parents are not using their students' username and passwords to go in and log all those minutes for reading books that maybe the parents are enjoying.
I understand. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, can you ask the vendor, what our possibilities are and what impact that may have on any availability, and just come back to the committee and let them know?
Yes, sir. I'll have that ready for next committee.
I went through K through 5 and I actually don't have any questions. I thought it all looked really good. Got to watch some fun videos, which was great because my daughter's 20, so I haven't seen that in a long time. But no, I was thoroughly impressed.
I actually went backwards. Started with high school and then tripped over some stuff in middle school. So I'll be honest, I was lending to the remainder of the group to look at elementary.
And in all fairness, Mr. Sides, I was depending on you because I was really focusing on K through 5 because I knew you were coming from the back end. But for any parents that are watching, this curriculum, what we're talking about, I'll just read it off real quick. In kindergarten, lessons begin, I am a citizen. So they're learning, how to be a citizen in their classroom, how to be a good friend, how to follow rules, being a new student in a classroom with, all of their classmates. I thought the assignments and the videos and the lessons and the little activities, they create a timeline and they're able to, start with, the first day of school and create timelines throughout the whole school year of different current events or things that might happen in their classroom or their community or in the nation. There was a lot of focus on, Labor Day, 9/11, Constitution Day, the first day of fall, winter, spring, summer, election day, all the way through different things, Groundhog Day, Martin Luther King celebration. So I was extremely impressed. And then, from kindergarten on to first grade, they're learning about people, places, and environments. Again, learning about being a good citizen, what are laws, what are your rights and responsibilities. Again, more lessons on the Constitution, Martin Luther King, the Bill of Rights. it transitions into second grade. America, our nation. There was a lot of focus on, geography, and I could see how this would connect, with their science, lessons. I was so impressed at how all of this was kind of fluid, between, the social studies and the science, and connecting, things that they're learning in the classroom, subject to subject. Let's see, the United States of America, different regions, across the country, the Great Lakes, and, learning little songs and stuff, to help really. So I was really impressed that they were using so many different learning styles, to get students, attention and stuff. From second grade, America, Our Nation. Third grade transitions into geography and natural resources. This one, third grade, may have been my favorite because there was so much information. First off, they're taught about the three branches of government at the federal level, and how that transitions into the state government with those three same branches, and even into our local government and how those three branches work. And there was so much incredible, they provided all the links, like, on information about Union County. I am not from Union County, so I really enjoyed looking at those links and seeing that our students would be learning about the history and the formation of Union County, and how it was kind of a merger from Mecklenburg and Anson County. I found all of that very, very fascinating. Then from third grade into fourth grade, it's North Carolina government and Constitution, North Carolina people, different cultures, and state symbols. This was absolutely amazing too, because it I saw a lot of focus on, like, the Cherokee Indian heritage, and how they use storytelling, and, different cultures, music, and that their books are actually in their memory, and how this one person, this Cherokee Indian is explaining how he never really knows what story he's going to tell, because he has over 100 books in his memory or whatever, and he just starts telling stories. So, and that's just one example. There's many others. I thought the history on Chapel Hill, NC State, Duke, Research Triangle Park, I thought fourth grade was extremely well done. And then into fifth grade, it was immigration and migration, growth and change in the United States. So again, I think all of these lessons are just home runs. I thought it was wonderful, and I hope that that parents have an opportunity to see what we have seen. Because everything from the vocabulary to the little activities and the foldable things that they're going to be making in the classroom look really, really good. So thank you.
You bring up a good point. How can we tell from the information you provided, either here or online, what is new for this year? I know did you indicate it somehow, because you made in your email, you had slight changes or what have you, and I didn't know what had changed.
Most of the standards are new for second grade. Let me see, is that right? Second grade, first and second grade, and fifth grade. Very few of the standards changed at all for kindergarten, third, and fourth grade. So what you see for first and second and fifth is pretty much all new and laid out as new.
Right.
The kindergarten third and fourth grade, very little changed, and so you wouldn't see any of that. You would either see it almost all highlighted or no highlights in between. So that's kind of how the team kind of worked on it, and of course they prioritized those initially because it had the most work first grade, second grade, and fifth grade were prioritized.
How about middle and high? I'm sorry.
Same way, a lot changed in between middle and high because those standards were all rewritten. And so what you're going to see is
So
we might
almost
use the
everything is
same
new?
activity. It could apply if it's, I know you're
Okay.
talking about the Haymarket riots or something like that. And
Right.
in a history class, that's not going to change, but where it's placed on a standard may change.
Okay.
So, Mr. Size, if you don't mind, if I could help Dr. Breedlove answer your question. So the link that we were sent, and for anyone watching this meeting, for kindergarten, the first, and we're only talking about the first grading period, the first, 22 days or whatever. In kindergarten, for the first grading period, there were no changes. And it's
Yeah.
right here. And then for first grade, it's all new units for the first grading period. Second grade is all new units. Third grade, it doesn't say.
Right.
I guess it's the same. No changes. Fourth grade must no changes, and
Right.
fifth grade must be no changes from the first grading period.
First grading period.
So.
Fifth grade.
Oh, I'm
Yes.
sorry. I'm sorry. It was, it says new units. I apologize. Thank you.
Yep.
So, just when you do go back and look at this, it'll be on your links to let you know if it's new or not.
I was just curious. I'm used to in policy where the new part is in red. And
Yes, sir.
Michelle spoils us.
yeah. So, saying that there's slight changes, okay, where? Because that might be the part you want to revisit since it's new, but that's fine.
In the quick turnaround, even if it's just a line item here or there, we'll try and have those ready in red. The next time.
Red or bolded or something.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions? Any more questions about K through 5?
I forget your name every time. Dr. Rogers. All right. I mentioned asked Dr. Rogers, and as I'm looking, so the teacher has the ability to take these lessons and pretty much create their own, not create their own, but use this as a guide to create some exciting, interesting lessons in their classroom. Because I'm looking at one, like Station 3, dealing with the Gullah Geechee, and that lesson, that can be a very exciting lesson. And so they can pretty much, turn the whole room into maybe a Gullah room and have people come in and, okay, I want to be in that class when they
And because you mentioned that, they with that, Reverend Kirkpatrick, they also had bluegrass music and Appalachian folk, and there's going to be some good stuff going on in the classrooms.
Hooting and hollering.
So I think he did ask a good question. So I know this is, and I did see this in every time I opened a different grade. Let me open one. It was kind of presented in the introduction that this is a framework, I guess, for the teacher to use. But I think it does kind of go back to, I guess, are they going to use everything that we've seen here, or will they be adding their own? Or, how does that get approved? Or teachers will just add their own lessons and don't necessarily have to use what we've seen?
Yeah, so I'll start with that. Two things, 'cause I've been reflecting on that piece, Miss Merrill, and I thought back to when I was a second grade teacher teaching social studies or science. And one of the things that I want to make sure we're clear on is how we define outside or supplemental resources, right? So an example in teaching fourth grade, as an example, fourth grade social studies is all about, I'm sorry, not fourth grade, say local government, whichever grade level that is. I can't remember. Third grade. One of the things that I would probably consider doing as a third grade teacher when I teach those subjects is inviting members of local government into the class to speak. Hopefully with COVID this year, we're allowing more visitors to come in that are directly tied to academic. So that might not be a suggestion they see in this document, but it is a best practice to help kids connect the relevant work of local government, whether that's a board member, a mayor, a county commissioner. So what we're saying to our teachers, and I put my lens on as a first-year teacher who's starting from scratch, this is the foundation. For your curriculum, this is the foundation that we expect you to teach. These are activities, these are guides, these are resources, so that you don't have to start from your own. You build your lessons and the experiences your kids have from this upwards. Compared to a 30-year vet that's been teaching, for standards who are brand new, there's going to be new material, new timelines and scope and sequence that they're going to have to cover. But this is the absolute foundation for which they have to build their lessons. But really what we want to get to, especially with social studies, is that experiential learning, where I talked about bringing in guest speakers or other resources that might be applicable. The other change we have made is really encouraging and positioning our schools to have a more concrete vetting process for when other materials might want to be introduced. Dr. Breedlove and his team, Ms. Merrill and board, have been working on a form that would be centralized to the principal and to the team if they want to have something vetted that is not included in this. And that is another step we're taking this year from a vetting process. So,
Well,
I hope that helps.
can I ask you something along those lines of vetting? Okay, particularly for the grades that have some or a lot of new material. You get down here under SLE resources and additional supplemental resources. I'm assuming that each one of these listed for whatever topic, whatever grade, has been vetted by somebody at UCPS. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. So there shouldn't be any surprises on this material. Okay. It's when somebody, like for instance, I don't know which one this is, grade 6, reading unit 1, writing like a social scientist. It doesn't have additional supplemental resources. So that may be a teacher has to pull something together to complete their lesson plan, right? And that's where the additional vetting process you're talking about could come into play. Is that a fair example?
maybe, I think that's a fair one. But what I would say is the curriculum team, in my opinion, and Dr. Rogers, you can confirm this, what you have in front of you is enough for any teacher to teach this standard. So there may be chances you don't need to do anything else. This is it. And that's the purpose of the curriculum, is so that a teacher doesn't have to pull in outside.
Right.
But I think in some cases, like I like the community guest or the community speaker as an example. If there's ways to integrate this with science, there might be a science material that Ms. Merrill that you could bring in as a supplemental. It might be an experiential. It might be a field trip to see the General Assembly. I mean, that could be a way to extend the lesson. So when it says you can do that, that's really what it means, in my opinion. But fundamentally, what you have in front of you is what the teachers need to teach these standards.
Thank you. Go ahead.
And I actually think, Gary, that one does have SELs.
Oh, is it on the next page?
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone had suggested learning experiences. So there's guidance.
It has a dot, but nothing with it. The next page, unless you got.
And we are gonna get to middle school here in a minute. But let's stay on K through 5. Yeah, sure. So looking at K through 5, there was a vocabulary for each grade level. And I guess this is the vocabulary, again, just for the first grading period. Will teachers just use this vocabulary, or can they create their own vocabulary and not use this vocabulary?
This is the vocabulary that the state, obviously from the standards when we build vocabulary lists, these words appear in the lessons that we are teaching in the scope and sequence, and then what we are held accountable to. So obviously in every class that we teach in elementary and even middle and high school, there are some words that students don't know what it is that the teacher could use and put on a word wall, something like that. But these are the musts, the must-haves.
Okay. No, so this is the approved vocabulary,
That is
K through 5, and we really shouldn't deviate from what we have been presented here. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is correct.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you. If there are no more K through 5, we'll go straight into middle school, 6, 7, and 8.
I haven't some questions and issues on middle school, and it also bleeds over into high school because the same class is offered in high school, and that is in 7th grade, it's Unit 4, Political Revolutions. You've got a little bit of I understand the definitions. The Reformation, yeah, okay. And I like Enlightenment. Okay. I like the American Revolution. That's good. But I completely do not get stressing the French Revolution and the Haitian Revolution. And this is pretty much, if I'm looking at it right, it's the same for middle and high school class segment. It's Unit 4 in high school. Here's the thing. If we're going to talk about revolutions, I don't see anything regarding the Russian Revolution, the Soviet Empire, and the fall of the Soviet Empire. In 1920, Bolshevik Revolution, on through the development of the Soviet Union, the Cold War, its involvement in world geopolitical issues, and the eventual fall of the Soviet Empire, all in the 20th century. And I don't see it in the curriculum at all. I'm sorry, the French Revolution, I get it. They ran around and sent a bunch of the nobles to the guillotine. But as far as relevance in today, I see that more important material. Also, I don't see any mention of the Chinese Revolution or the China state. Look at the Chromebooks you're using. Lenovo, Chinese company. We have Mandarin DLI in some of our schools, but we are not studying the Chinese even just through the 1940s, the communist revolution there, Mao Zedong, the repression and murder of millions of their people. And there are some in our country that idealize the socialist communist agenda. And we're not even teaching it extensively to our kids in high school. And another thing, and this is a hot topic today, Cuba, the Cuban Revolution with Castro in the 1950s. And in 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis, where this world came to the very brink of nuclear annihilation. Closest it's ever been, and ever been since. Not even touched on. I have a real problem with the middle school and the high school revolution curriculum in those areas specifically. And not to mention there are other things like, how about the Islamic Revolution? What impact did that have on our country in the late 1970s when the Shah was kicked out and the Islamic religious leaders took over? Effects that we still feel today. We're trying to deal with them today, or we're worried about them becoming a nuclear power. I think that is another, and that affects the entire geopolitical synergy of the Middle East. So I think that's an important topic. No offense to the French or the Haitians, but I just see that as a higher priority. And I'll tell you another one that I would like to see. And I call that the bloodless revolution. And that is in South Africa, the transition from apartheid to majority rule. And studying one of the men, I think of the greatest men, one of the greatest men of the 20th century, Nelson Mandela. Don't even touch on it. There is, in the transition in South Africa was the last embedded segregation in the world. And in a peaceful transition, went from the white minority to the black majority. And a man who spent more than half his life in jail became president of the country. And we're not even studying it.
So those are great recommendations, Mr. Side. So let me verify, like when I'm looking at middle school, and I know the K through 5 was the first grading period. When I look at, for example, sixth grade, we have unit 1, 2, and 3. How many grading periods is that for a unit 1? Is that 3 grading periods, or will unit 1, 2, and 3 all be covered in the first grading period?
The first grading period.
Okay, so it was as well.
So is that to say there might be, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Gary. It looks like Russian Revolution and Chinese Revolution is in the world history for 9th grade. And that was my question. This is only the first 4 units. So
It is mentioned in the 9th grade, but again, the detail in what we were supplied with today is all about what has the American Revolution, what is a revolution, but it is focusing on the Haitian Revolution and the French Revolution. And again, since we're only seeing the first grading period, I don't know. But to me, you could build a whole grading period around the American Revolution and another grading period on some of the ones I mentioned before. I would be worrying about the French Revolution and the Haitian Revolution. No offense to those folks.
Do you have any thoughts about that, or want to talk to one of our instructional coaches? Maybe some of the things Mr. Sides mentioned is in the second grading period, or
I could be very well missing it. It's somewhere else, like we said, in the future. But if we're starting off the first grading period with what I would think would be the foundation and some of the more critical elements of, in this case, revolution, I don't see what's there as it.
The only comment I would make, on the choice of those, and of course, it's been quite a while since I was in the classroom and never taught in middle school, but I would say that, the type of revolution that we discuss applies directly to a particular standard or a particular objective that is being covered. And so when you have these big picture items that come out of a revolution, and where does it apply? And all of those revolutions that you mentioned obviously have specific topics that go with them, as to the reasons why the revolution occurred, and then what came out of that. And so we're looking at the Haitian Revolution, the American Revolution, the French Revolution. There are certain themes that come out of those that have to apply into because we only have 10 days to teach all of those, right, and all of that. And so we are on a very, I hate to say that, but we're on a tight schedule, right? And that's why you will see overlap from grade level to grade level, depending on what the standard and the themes are, that these topics continue to come up, even through what you don't see are the American history documents and that, but that will come later, and we can address that. But as for this particular first unit, there are limits to what we are going to discuss and how much time that we're going to spend on it because of the scope and sequence of the entire class.
Okay, so I guess what I'm saying is, unless and until I can see the full year's curriculum, all the grading periods, that's the only way my concerns can be met. Because if I'm looking at the first grading period, I'm going, the first one's supposed to be the foundation and the most important, that kind of sets the tone. And I believe all the ones I mentioned are a heck of a lot in the scheme of things, and especially in its relevancy to today's world. Okay. I see those more important. So not knowing what's going on the other grading period, I'm hanging my hat on this and I'm saying, why in the world are we going here where how's a kid going to, in practical use, what are you going to take from the French Revolution to a kid that's maybe graduating and say going into the military? Help me. Where?
So can I ask a question and or make a comment that I want clarification on? Number one, as I reviewed that particular section, I believe that I saw the word suggested, as in suggested learning. Help me out. Say it again. Suggested learning experiences. So when all of those are listed, I guess my level of clarification is we want to teach on the topic of revolution. We want to teach students about multiple revolutions so that they understand different perspectives, correct? However, given that you have 10 days, might you find that because these are suggested, does that mean that our teachers could spend all 10 days or 5 of them on the American Revolution versus kind of hit and miss and kind of spreading this stuff too thin? That's my first question. My second question is, and maybe one of our ICs can answer this, what Mr. Sides was commenting on, would we expect to see those other types of revolutions coming later in the curriculum during the second grading period, third grading period, fourth grading period? In other words, this unit of political revolutions, does that come up again within the 7th grade curriculum? As I don't know.
Is this a semester class or is this a whole year? It's 6 weeks. I'm a grading.
Yeah, in middle school and high school, it's 6 weeks.
Oh, man.
In elementary, they get 9.
And then it's the rest of the school year, there's nothing related to revolutions.
We don't know. That's what I just asked.
So a little clarification.
Yeah.
The units are, even though it says political revolutions, it's not all political revolutions throughout time. It's kind of a
Right.
chronological period.
Right.
So this is going to stop when you get to like the 1900s, right? And so the Russian Revolution, Chinese Revolution, you will see those later on. Apartheid, I know in high school world history, there's a whole SLE just on apartheid. So they will show up later on. We moved from, in the past, we had done kind of thematic units where there's a unit just on politics, a unit just on economics. And this year we're switching middle school back to where it's a little more chronological based on feedback from teachers and students. So those other ones will be there.
All right. Then help me with the thought process of where the French Revolution is justified in the time it's given in this segment. Help me with why it's there.
Well, at that time period in European history, and actually all around the world, countries were governed by monarchs, absolute monarchs. And this was the first time that the people stepped forward and said no. And they overthrew that absolute monarch.
Okay.
We want a democracy. Right. And so that was like the American Revolution, the Haitian revolutions are the first times that countries said, no, we're not going to be imperialized. We're not going to be colonized anymore. We're going to fight back. And that opened the door for other countries around the world to do the same thing.
Now, when you say that, because you're basically what you're trying to do here, if I understand you correctly, is you're trying to look at revolutions and a timeline that ends about 1900. And then moving forward from there, it may be over here in this curriculum and something else, like you mentioned, apartheid is going to be over here and something else. So there's not going to be a political revolutions 2 that picks up right there. It's going to be covered, but it might be somewhere where you'd have to go find it. Is that
right? So like in the unit between World War I, World War II, we'll see the rise of totalitarian dictators like Stalin, like Mao. He kind of gets more after World War II.
Okay.
We talk about the decolonization of Africa and issues in the Middle East that have happened because of decolonization. So they do come later. But yeah, that's why we used to have it all together.
right?
But because of the feedback from the teachers, we tried to split it up a little bit more chronological for them.
So my concerns about those particular, I know it's not an all-inclusive list, but my concerns on those particular, what I consider revolutions of significance in world events, you can tell me confidently that in one shape or another, at some time period or grading period or another, all those subjects are addressed. You feel comfortable that those topics particularly are addressed, or we can find out to make sure.
Right, I'll look, the Islamic Revolution, 7th grade, I don't know if that one is in there, but we do talk about the Middle East in the high school world history course. So I'll have to go back and double check
Okay.
that one.
Okay.
But yeah, because there's so many revolutions that, and the teams, they kind of went back and forth about which one should we cover.
Yeah, you have to, well, in my book, you have to pick the ones that may have been slightly in history. And I know 1979 is not slightly history for y'all, but it is for me. But it's still relevant today. That's my guideline for looking at, if you've only got limited number of time to pick out these revolutions, like you say, because there are so many. Let's look at the ones that have a relevancy to today. I would say the Islamic Revolution, as far as the Middle East goes, is of real significance, the way it has affected the area. So I will, now having a better understanding of how you're looking at from a time frame, and that's why this material is here. It's not meant to prioritize it or minimize the other material. It's just that it's in different places. All right, great.
So one suggestion I would have is, looking at the 6, 7, and 8 is maybe even put a time period like the 1900s on there, so that we understand what time frame, what span of time, for we're going to cover in 6th grade, we're going to cover in 7th or 8th. Maybe that would help. Mm-hmm.
So this is for all that we're being given today is for the first grading period, elementary, middle, and high.
Yes, sir.
And in high school, are these all the mandatory classes, or there's some electives in here too?
Now, these are what you're going to see for high school are world history, which is 9th grade,
Right.
and then economics and personal finance. And then we will also this semester begin showing you the civics and econ as well.
Which would be taught in some schools, or whatever that means.
Second semester.
That's why you don't see that course now, because we're not ready to unload it.
Yes, sir.
So some of my questions, I know I'm jumping ahead to high school.
Okay.
So some of the questions I'm going to have on material that I didn't feel is addressed in what you've supplied us here, you're probably going to give me the same answer. Well, it's coming up.
Probably.
We didn't forget it. It's just somewhere else.
And because the state sent the unpacking documents so late, what I remember in our prior curriculum meeting was we were going to ask to see the first grading period today, because we did not feel or know that our team had enough time, to put together the whole year. So we asked for the first grading period so we could see how we were going to move in. Because I was concerned. I had even asked at 2 meetings ago, are we even going to have time, for our team to put these lessons together? And I was surprised when Dr. Breedlove said yes. And so, we said, okay, well, let's start with the first grading period to see how we're going to kick this off. But going forward, as soon as we have the second grading period, and all the way through, I could see this being in our monthly meetings to receive, the next packet they put together for the second grading period, all the way through the 6th or 9th grading period.
And I agree with you. And in talking with Dr. Breedlove, I think our plan moving forward is whenever that second grading, I'll just use second grading period as an example, when that is ready to be released to the board, we will do that so that at the next month's committee meeting, we can have this conversation. So we'll avoid having to call a separate one unless we need to. Is trying to get ahead of it, because I think every month we would want you to look at and then make a recommendation to the full board for approval for the second 9 weeks or whatever that might be.
And I would also say to our instructional coaches, if you already kind of know how this is going to be mapped out for the year, maybe you can come back to the next curriculum meeting, and maybe we're not doing this, one chunk at a time, if you already know what the year's going to cover, let's go ahead and talk about that if you know it.
I agree with that because I would only assume that there would be a lot of parents that have the same question I did. Well, you're not covering this material, you're covering this, the first grading period. Why are we not getting to, where's the important stuff? In not knowing, and especially since it's changed from year to year at the whim of the State Board of Education, what's the big picture? Well, we're not going to know the big picture until everybody's taken all the unpacking documents and put together all the grading periods, correct? And then we'll see that my question was addressed in the third grading period over here. But you can't look at this. I guess my point is to parents, you can't look at this and see what your child is going to be taught for the year. You see the first grading period, the start, the laying the groundwork of what we're going to build off of. So don't jump the gun like I did and say, well, we're not covering this, and it's a heck of a lot more important than that. Well, there's a rhyme, which I learned today. There's a rhyme or reason because we're looking through a time frame. We're setting the foundation, and then we'll move on and build on.
Well said. So, again, I want every parent, everyone watching, because the state sent us the unpacking documents so late that we felt like we could only talk about the first grading period today because, our team was basically drinking through a fire hose trying to make sure we had our lesson plans ready, to walk back in the classroom in August. So, I apologize that we're not able to, show the full year today, but I know our team is doing the best they can with such short notice from what they received so late from the state. So I know that once they have more time and can catch a breath, just come back to us and say, this is how we plan on doing, the sixth grade year, the seventh grade year, the eighth grade year, high school. So, whenever you think you have that squared away, just come back and present that to us.
And some parents who have siblings that are close in age, my brother 2 years ago, well, he didn't study this stuff. What's the deal? Or he studied this then, and what's this? What's going on? That's because the State Board of Education has changed the game or the order or the material. So you might have an older boy that goes and gets this information and this order, and your daughter who's 2 years younger comes up now. Well, the class is not the same. It's moved around, different, adjusted, different term, what have you. That's because the playbook, if you will, changes that we're given, to use a sports analogy. But anyway.
I like that,
Yeah.
actually, because things can happen in the game that you didn't practice for. So, are there any other questions about grades 6, 7, and 8, or any comments, thoughts, input? Okay, then I say we move on to high school.
Okay, and I'm going to adjust my questions from why is this not covered in here to will this eventually be covered in some shape or form? Because I've learned now how this works. We talked about revolution. Human behavior, there is, in this segment, we were given some discussion of, I believe, Islam, some reference to a religion and changes in religion, but I'm wondering if it might be appropriate to actually talk about the origination of Christianity.
And so for anyone following along with us, we are discussing now, his question is from world history. So, so that everyone who may not have this in front of them or know what we're looking about, we're talking about world history.
Human behavior and cultural developments. Unit 2. And again,
Is Christianity addressed in world history and its foundation? So the world religions, the basis of them, their beliefs, their evolution, whatever at the beginning, is not part of the curriculum, part of the standards that are there. Any kind of changes that maybe have happened since our pickup point, then those would be included, like the Reformation is in there, but the foundation of Christianity is not. At the top of every one of these curriculum guides, you'll notice there's a statement in there about that this might not be everything a teacher needs to teach.
okay.
Right. So the teacher may need to go back and review what are the foundations of Christianity before we talk about the Protestant Reformation.
Right.
The activities we put in here, these lessons here, are laser focused on this is exactly what the standards are saying we need to teach.
Right.
And so
Okay.
we left that open for the teachers.
Right.
If you feel your students need that, go back and add that in there.
I'm going to go back to your analogy on revolution that we're going to work off of time frames. So what came before the Reformation? Well, the roots of Christianity. Now, I want to be careful on this, though, because I don't want to leave our teachers hanging out there on the comment that additional material, and they're not given proper guidance what is appropriate in discussing religion in a public school and not. I would like to see examples and a little guidance as to where to go and where not to go. But I think from a historical, because I've seen classes before that are historical study of the Bible, not as a religious document, but a historical document. And I think that's totally appropriate. And so I think that would be appropriate in this setting as well. If we are going to discuss the impact of religious events on society, then I think the formation of the Christian religion is relevant. Does that make sense?
Right.
Reverend Cooper, why don't you jump in on that?
Well, no, because
That's
I'm not.
that's your department.
That's why I preach it at church, not in school.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get some clarity on something. You're talking about, there's so many pages. My tutor is helping me over here. Okay.
It's hard. I find it's easier for me
Well,
anyway to follow it
and
on
I
the
will tell
computer.
you, if everyone will take a look at the screen, what I see here is human behavior is covering from the 1200s through 1492. So we're covering that time,
During this not
Yeah.
period.
during the 6 weeks period. So they're covering human behavior and cultural issues from 1200, from 1200 to 1492. Am I reading that right? Okay.
Yes.
And it's in 7 to 9 days.
Yeah, and they have to do this, because our teachers are superheroes. They have to do this in 7 to 9 days. And our students, they have to do this in 7 to 9 days.
So, yeah, I'm trying to understand I hear you talking about the Christian religion being taught. I'm trying to figure out, understand rather.
Like, for instance, here's a segment on the Crusades. Okay, well, why did they have the Crusades? Where did that come from? Well, if you really take it all the way back, in effect, it started with the Christian religion, which led to other historical events like the Crusades. So I would think you would want to have some background on what the Christian religion is. If you're going to start showing how in the future from that, how it affected world history. Does that Does that make sense? I mean, is that?
Absolutely.
And I
guess
see,
as
if
a
you look at
preacher-
this, if you look at the screen, what I see right here on Crusades and Effects, and Dr. Schneider, correct me if I'm wrong, you have the column there on key factual content, and the very last word is Christianity. So is there an aspect of this particular theme? It's one day, but is there an aspect here where perhaps that is discussed, addressed, etc.? Or I don't know. I just saw the word. So
Yeah, it's and we're focusing on the influence of Christianity. I mean, there is Islam's too. It was the difference between our beliefs, the Christian belief system and the Islamic belief system. And then you go anywhere around the world where there's Hinduism and Buddhism and Confucianism and all the different ones. They play a role. And so it's you mentioned 7 to 9 days. To be able to go back and to try to what are the key beliefs or practices that may be relevant to a particular lesson like this. We're not going to, do they need to know all about Christianity to understand, well, the Christians believe this, what's the basic difference between Christians and Muslims? Maybe you talk about, there are people the same book. They do share a lot of common beliefs, but they differed over this. They all were fighting for the Holy Land because it's sacred to Christians, because this is the birthplace of Jesus. It's sacred to Muslims because it's, the sites of various religious sites for Muslims. And so they wanted the land, who can control that? And that's, again, still continues today.
I guess what I'm just going on, again, staying at Crusades and Effects, going to these supporting questions. Why was Europe Catholic? Well, what's Catholic mean? Where did the Catholic faith come from to begin with? I'm just going back on what you were saying about revolution that we're trying to build on.
Right.
And if we're going to jump to the Crusades, I would think I would want to have, how was Islam formed? How was Christianity formed? The real beginnings of where all this came from. As far as, if we're going to follow the timeline analogy, does that?
And that's the challenge when we have a starting point for the course of year 1200.
Mhm.
Everything that's happening after 1200 had a beginning somewhere before that.
Why do you have to start at 1200?
That's what the state has said. That's the beginning of the course.
Well, how about if we say different? This is kind of a rhetorical question. What if we feel as a board, and this is kind of not rhetorical, but a philosophical. Personally, I feel that the origins of some of these religions is more important than events that started after 1200 and followed. And I say it's more important for our students to learn how these religions came about, perhaps their core beliefs, and why Christianity went over here and Islam went over there. I mean, that if I'm looking at world history, that's more important to me than jumping to 1200 and saying, okay, this is the mess that started over here and that's the mess that started over there. How did this stuff come about? Why did it come about? But see, we're back to, are we going to say that we as a board feel that or something else we run across in any grading period, to us, we feel as a board is more important to our students than what the state says. So maybe your 12, this segment gets cut down to, instead of what, how many days? 1 day. Oh, maybe it kind of goes to about 10 minutes. and my segment comes in there. So we didn't dump it, but I'm looking at you, I'm sorry, because that's not really your wheelhouse.
Well, I have
more
a
or less
question.
these gentlemen up here and ladies. That's kind of a philosophical question I have. If and when we do run against something that we feel strongly is either not covered or, and conversely, is covered and we don't feel it should be in the way it is. So what's the answer to that?
Okay, you're talking about the religion component, world history, and if it was a world religion class, then I could understand all of the components of what you're talking about as far as talking about the different religions. But my concern is, even with what we're talking about today, we're trying to say that we are the experts sitting at this table, and the experts are in Raleigh and those individuals who are sitting around this table. So I had an opportunity to go, Dr. Breedlove, to be a teacher, but I was scared to death of the praxis. So that was my choice. So if I wanted to be a teacher, where I specialize in trying to say what a curriculum is supposed to look like, then I would have went to school to be that teacher, and I could allow promotion to take place in my life and do what these guys are doing. I think that we're really starting to insult those who are doing the work by saying we don't like this and we don't like that. Now, there are some things that we don't like that we understand, and we're not going to go into that conversation. But some of this stuff, like what you're talking about, the religion component, that's totally, again, if it's a religious class dealing with world religion, then we can talk about all types of religion, how they started. But even me as a Christian and as a preacher, I do not feel that we need to focus on a whole segment dealing with Christianity in class when we have a school full of people who are from all different religions, and we do not want to insult our children. We do not want to insult our parents. And again, if you want to know about Christianity, come to church. I'll teach you that. Or we can talk about it some other place. But in school, we always talk about church and state is separate. But I think we may start getting into a place of insulting when we start trying to, because again, it depends on who's teaching. You might have somebody who is really over the top with, their beliefs, and we may have a situation where somebody can be insulted because of how they're teaching it and how they're presenting it. So I think we may want to just but focus on, I don't know.
No, I see what you're saying.
Right.
I see what you're saying. I guess I was using that as an example. I'm talking in bigger picture question. We're reviewing this material, and I'm not entirely clear on what flexibility we have to begin with. So basically, if we don't have the flexibility to amend as we feel as a board, then we're basically here just to ask questions. So I guess that's kind of my question. What is the flexibility of a local board to take this stuff and say, nope, I don't like that, we're going to do this instead? Or instead of doing 2 days on that, we're going to do 1 day on that, and we're going to do 1 day on this. And I don't care what the State Board of Education says. What's the answer?
I don't think local boards usually get this in depth in curriculum. Like, we trust that staff is going to do that.
Okay, so if the person controlling this, if you would go to the scroll to the part with the bullets for the standards and objectives addressed, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I want to make sure I understand this, but if I understand this correctly, these are the objectives that we have received from the state, but then it's the local school district that attaches or decides the lessons that will complete that standard. And so our local team has chosen what's before us today to meet those standards for the first grading period. Now, it is my understanding that we have to have lessons to cover all of those bullets right there. We have to do that so that in 12th grade, our diplomas and transcripts are certified that we taught that and they received it, they passed the class. But we our team has put together these lessons for the first 6 weeks to meet that state standard so that they can graduate from Union County Public Schools receiving what the state determined had to be covered.
Okay, so if I'm hearing this correctly, we meet these standards to meet the state's qualifications. Our flexibility is how much focus is given in particular matters, whether it's 1 day, 9 days, 10 for a particular subject matter. Is that kind of
choosing the activities
yeah,
and
reference materials and what area is the focus of what period of time for instruction? Is that a
The
fair
state gives
statement?
us scope and sequence suggestions, yes, and that is basically how much time it is roughly going to take to get from point A to point B by the end of the semester. And then, of course, as to Ms. Merrill's point, getting through all the standards and objectives that they have given us within that unit. Yes.
And because of the amount of state standards that were shoved down to us at the 12th hour or whatever, very, very late, that determines that
The speed,
unfortunately
the
we
pace.
can only spend a day on a topic in order to meet all of the state requirements.
I think that's important for people to understand the constraints we're under from the State Board of Education as far as not only what subject matter, but basically how fast we've got to do it, which shows how little, in some cases, almost inadequate depth and discussion we can give these items.
It clearly illustrates to me how fast our teachers have to move.
Yeah.
And if little Johnny or little Salary aren't grasping it in that one day,
we're already moved on.
it really puts the teacher in the classroom in a really tough spot when, children are learning at different paces and may not get it in one day.
We are micromanaged from the State Board of Education level on our material more than I was aware. This exercise, to me, the number one thing this exercise has done for me is to prove to me the constraints we're under from subject matter, the time we can devote to this stuff, the flexibility we have. And I would assume that parents will get the same message. And it's, I don't like it, frankly, but
Well, and
I'm
I'm going
what
to
it
make
is.
I'm going to make it even worse for you, for us. This is a semester-long course. This is not a year-long course.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why it's so compacted too, in December. So, or January, because we take exams when we come back from winter break. So, that's another reason why world history is so compacted. It's a semester course. Any other thoughts or comments on world history? Okay. Then let's take a look at high school economics and personal finance, which I know that was a big push from Raleigh.
This is the one that was involved.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I didn't see anything in where I would assume it would be income and education. And I know now you're going to tell me we're going to get to it somewhere else, but building a resume, applying for a job interview, filling out a job application. Please tell me that's coming later on. Now, wait, this is new. So we don't really have any idea if it is or isn't, right? Because we haven't.
Or if it's in a different course.
Well, I will share with you from both of my Union County Public School graduates. When my children went through civics and econ, they did have to do an entire unit on putting together a resume and applying for a job and then having a budget and purchasing a car, renting an apartment, furnishing the
Yeah.
apartment.
Yeah, a lot of
And-
that's in this one, but I didn't see that.
Okay.
I just now thought a natural progression would be the interviewing and resume and all that kind of good stuff.
But I
And
will
it's somewhere
will
else
tell
in the
you
plan.
though, my children had no clue and had a really good time making up their resume in high school. But it was fascinating to see them go through that process and having to go buy suits for the interview and everything.
It's somewhere else. Let me guess.
So yes and no. They do career planning, and they look at and our students are going to look at options outside of college when they graduate high school. But as far as specifically completing a resume or specifically filling out a job application, I don't know that those activities were built into.
Not in this class. Not in
Well, right. They could fit into it. So when you click, Lori, would you mind clicking on one of the units? Thank you. So if you notice where it says suggested pacing 20 days, so that entire particular unit is supposed to span 20 days. And then
Yeah.
if you scan, Lori, if you scroll down lower, and I can't remember exactly where it is, but we've developed these suggested learning experiences. We call them suggested learning experiences because it's not necessarily a full lesson, but would encompass an activity that covers all of this. So there's a good chance that there's about 10 of these. I don't remember exactly how many per unit. It varies. But then there's going to be, it's not going to fill the bulk of the 24 days or the 20 days. So the teachers would have the leeway to go ahead and add those in.
Okay.
But again, these SLEs, as Dr. Schneider said, in all of them, are laser focused on the standards
Yeah.
and the objectives, really. Okay, because the standards are that overarching piece, and then the objectives get really specific on what it is that we have to cover.
I will tell you, I was a little sad to see that civics and econ was changed. Because again, going back to your questions and your concerns, and I'm just going to give a shout out to Piedmont High School because my son really had a great experience going through this exercise. They had to write a resume. They had to go to the bank. I'll never forget my kids going on the North Carolina State Employees Credit Union and seeing, filling out like what it would be like, to borrow money, to go to college or, borrow money to buy a car to get to work. And so I don't know if that helps answer your question, but they did through the civics and econ, and I would hope that a lot of that stuff would carry over into this new plan. But I mean, I could not believe that my son was having to write a resume, apply for a loan. He knew what the monthly payment was going to be. If he wanted to go to Chapel Hill or Appalachian, he had to go find out, okay, well, how much is it going to cost me
That's
to
in
go
there.
there? And so it was pretty, the teachers that my children had really went through that exercise with them. And I know that Mrs. Heintel's children, went through it at Sun Valley as well. So I don't know if does that help
Well,
answer your question? or?
A lot of the things you talked about are in this. It just struck me that it seemed like a gap considering where they were going, dealing with the bank, credit and all that kind of good stuff. And budgeting, well, how are you going to budget? You got to have money. Well, how are you going to get money? You're going to have a job. How are you going to get a job? And it just kind of leaped over that. And to me, that seems like a basic, but again, I understand the constraints, but I hope I would really recommend that because like you were saying, I mean, I'm going through my son getting for his first job, here's what they're going to ask you. We role play. Here's what they're going to ask you. Why do you want to come work here? and you better have an answer. And how to fill out an application, because they're all different. Job applications are all different. And as a high school student, you may not have a big resume, but you still have some activities you're involved in, things like that. So if there's any way you can sneak that in, I would strongly support it.
We have our portrait of a graduate as well. And so we're continuing to look at that. But job applications, resumes, these are all aspects of high school that, let's get our high school principals together and find out, let them talk with their teachers and that where can we get a consistent place to put in. It may be this course, they may select that, or it could be something else that's related. Absolutely. And let them work out a plan on making sure that, and it might not just be these two things. There may be other things that are identified that we want to make sure when students enter high school, by the time they leave, they have been taught how to do these things, how to apply for a loan, how to, making sure by the end that these boxes are checked for all of our grads.
Self-sufficient and financially literate. That's how I read what these standards are. And getting a job to me is a big part of that.
I have a question.
Agree.
We're gonna do paper, rock, scissors. Okay. All right. So this curriculum, and I agree. And when I was in high school, we did a lot of this in a business class. And I can't even remember my teacher's name. But this is information that I totally agree with Gary that really needs to be taught, because when you become an adult, you'll wish you were a kid again when you start having to deal with purchasing and buying and what have you. So this is interesting to know that it's a part of social studies curriculum. So has it always been a part of?
Principles of Business teaches a lot of this to our students that take it, but not all students take CTE courses, right? So it's up to them. But we do teach it in various ways. And going back to my earlier comment, we need to be consistent, and rather than just allowing each school to determine but you might miss something here or there. So if we can have consistency across the board, and I think our principals would really like that task on identifying some of these things in the life skills, and how do we are going to apply it with our portrait of a graduate and being consistent across the board.
That was a great question. So it made me think of something that has come up a lot over the past couple of years. Are these going to be offered at the honors level? Because as soon as we talked about CT, I know a lot of students don't take base classes or CTE classes because they don't want it to affect their GPA. Because it's not an honors class. So do we plan on this being offered at the honors level?
Yes, ma'am. It's almost, it's very rare for any of our classes, a core wise to not be taught as an honors level.
Because I know we've had this conversation, and I hate to even bring it up again, but Math 1 was not an honors level. And then, to my confusion and disappointment, the very next year it was offered as an honors level. And so, at any rate, do you know if this is going to be offered at every high school at different levels, including honors?
Yeah, what I will do is go in and verify the course code that is with the state, and that'll dictate the honors level. But I will go on record saying I would be very surprised if it's not going to be offered, if the state is not offering this at an honors level. And so
what would that look like? How would they jazz it up to be an honors class? Would you expect?
Well, there's a couple of different ways. You can go more in depth in certain areas, and what that may
move faster and then get it more.
Some of that could be also, if we pack more into an honors course, of course, you would have to move faster through that. But it's really about the depth that you go and the activities that are and the expectations for the students that are taking those courses.
And I see the additional resources down at the bottom. You know, learning how to read a pay stub, an income tax bracket. You know, what is a W-4, W-2, a 1040? You know, maybe an honors class. You know, that would be required, not a consideration.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, all I wanted to say is I love this class. I wish they were getting it sooner than senior year because I feel like a lot of it they need to start thinking about earlier. I feel like, did Naviance have an option? I know we don't use Naviance anymore, but did they have a resume option? So does SCORE or Major Clarity have a resume option?
I was going to say, once you enter high school, and I will verify this soon because we'll be there, every parent and child gets access to SCORE as our college readiness platform. And I'm pretty sure resume writing, college application, that's our new way of looking at transcript review with counselors, and all of that pieces in there. It may also be at least the resume job piece in Major Clarity. I'd have to ask Dr. Breedlove to confirm that with Mr. Davis, but I am relatively sure it's in SCORE. And that's a platform that all of our high school students started using, I believe, for the first time a year ago as we transitioned out of Naviance.
Well, and I think Major Clarity is middle school has access. Like I
Correct.
played around on that. It's pretty awesome.
Major Clarity is
Yeah.
612. SCORE is 912.
Any other questions or comments? I do agree. You know, it's a shame this is your senior year, really, because going back, you know, I can only use my children's experience as the example. You know, they got this in 10th grade, not 12th grade. So,
Is there any way that possibly, even not this full course, but maybe some parts of it could be implemented in maybe like 9th or 10th grade, some kind of way? No. If you say no,
I don't know. I just know that when you look at the amount of coursework and classes that our high school kids have to take, we have to be very structured in order to meet graduation requirements.
it occurred to me they could take the electives. It wouldn't be this course, but it could be the business class electives and stuff like that that might would address some of this content.
Sorry, Major Clarity does offer a resume builder in it as well. We talked about SCORE, but Major Clarity does too.
One more personal thing. And really, if your child is thinking of anything after high school, college included, like you could start having them build their resume, because for college, they want to see your volunteer activities. And like sometimes you don't really remember everything that you did volunteer wise. So
Part-time jobs.
yeah, part-time jobs. Absolutely.
Camps that maybe they had leadership in running some summer camps or something. Being a teacher cadet or in the guidance office, something like that. But yeah, do not wait until your senior year to start your resume
Learning about the real world.
and looking at colleges. Yes, Mr. Sides.
I didn't see something specific, but maybe it's in various pieces. And I'm going to call this kind of an umbrella category of learning to live on your own. I know it was a real shock for my oldest when you go to get an apartment. Okay, well, you got to have a deposit. You got to have the first month's rent. You got to have a credit check. Now you have to have renter's insurance. Okay, then what are you going to put in it? How are you going to furnish it? And I don't know if that's really, I mean, because I see bits and pieces of, you know, rent versus buy and this and that. But again, pulling back to the real world, what's awaiting you when you finally decide, or you get kicked out of home and you're not in a college dorm, you're going into the real world? What's facing you? How do where do you learn that you have to go make a deposit at a utility company to turn on your power? what do you do if you don't have any furniture or coming up with the rent, what's that going to take so that you know how much you're going to have to save before you can afford to move out. I didn't get the sense that and that's kind of a life skill kind of thing, that it had it in bits and pieces, but it didn't seem to bring it all together. So I hope that the teachers in their flexibility can kind of hit those topics like renting versus owning and things like that on the actual transition into your first place on your own. What's it going to take to get your first place? Because I would assume you're not coming right out of living with your parents out of high school and buying a house. That's not the big decision you're faced with. It's first of all, how do you get a roof over your head? So I'm confident that they'll bring that together.
I know in civics and econ they did. I don't know about this because I remember my sons looking at apartments around Charlotte to see how much, their rent would be.
And again, it may
Each
be in
month.
the next grading period or the
Yeah, I
grading
don't
period
know.
after that of this.
I know in there, obviously we're still, the first 6 weeks is built, but as far as semester-long projects and that they would work on, assigning, I know this has been done in the past, and I would imagine we'll continue to do that students will be assigned a specific job, an age, and, having children, no children, and then, okay, where can you live? What can you do with the salary that you've been given? And how do you go about doing these type of things? I know that that's been a common lesson. Sometimes it's a multi-week project.
Mhm.
And
Yeah. It's bringing a lot
they
of
may
things
have come back to
together.
you as a
Yeah.
parent, say, how do I do this? What do I need to, well, you got to
here's
have,
$500 you need to
Right.
do it now. Go
yeah,
get the
I can work here and I can have all these things. No, you can't.
Yeah.
All right. You have to live on what you earn. So, yes, sir. I know that is my, going through it the first time I saw that lesson, I saw that activity but to the depth that you're asking for, and our teachers will have to own that and be able to produce that with students. But I do believe that is an activity that will continue.
One thing I would like to recommend, only because I didn't see it on here, if I just missed it, let me know if I missed it. But I didn't see anything on here about learning the importance of your credit score. What is a good credit score? What is a bad? And how to improve your credit score. It's up there. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
There.
There you go.
I don't know how I missed that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
It's a lot.
and it's
That's
small print.
Yeah. I'm like, where is that? I should have done a control F, but
Along that. And
So
I couldn't
we're
find
good?
how
we're
to,
good.
yeah.
Yep.
I had to dig to find out. It talked about how to have a good credit score or what the cause and effect are. But I had to dig a little bit to find how do you build your first credit file? How do you start things off? I had to dig around. It's in there. I just had to dig around a little bit.
So yeah, I did a control F. That didn't work, but okay. I'm glad it's in there.
I will be interested in seeing the next grading period of particularly this curriculum.
Yeah. Okay.
All
It looks great.
Yeah.
Just my 2 cents for what that's worth.
I have a new appreciation. Honestly, I have a new appreciation for what you're given what you're given and how you have to make it work for the teachers in the classroom. The constraints we work under, the lack of flexibility, and what I think is inadequate time frame on certain subjects that may, in my opinion, be worthy of diving deeper. You just don't have the time. We got to move on. And I have a new appreciation for those challenges that you face and all of our educators face. So thank you.
And again, don't forget, I mean, our teachers are having to do this lightning fast, which also means our students are having to do this lightning fast. So it's a huge ask. So,
I just want to say, piggybacking on what everybody else has said, well, I don't think y'all said it at that moment, but y'all said it throughout our gathering. I commend you guys for the work that you all do. And if there are teachers listening, I mean that from the bottom of my heart. It is a hard job. Two of the most underpaid professions I often say is the teacher and the preacher. But we're talking about teachers now. Some, all right. All right, but seriously, it's a hard job. It's a hard job to deal with the attitudes, the emotions of a child every day, wanting to be that teacher, but at times you find yourself being that counselor. And so I'm so excited about this school year, and I encourage each one of you teachers, if you're listening, to be prepared to have a great year. I really am excited about it, and I believe that you guys are going to rock this 2021, 2022 year, and so I'm excited about it. I really am.
I think this has been a wonderful exercise. I thank you for putting this together for us. And, you know, as you have the second grading period, third grading period, or if you have an understanding of what the year is going to look like and what you're building towards, all of that information, you know, would be nice to come back to curriculum. And thank you for doing this. It really is amazing to me, the different lessons and exercises that I got to see, and I hope that parents have the opportunity to see this as well, to see the amazing work that the curriculum that's being put together in Union County. So, thank you.
Thank you. So I have my tasks to accomplish for next time. Looking at username and password for Mayan for parents. All right, I've got on here honors EPF verification that we will have that, and then also getting a time frame that is covered specifically in world history, so that it help us understand what we're dealing with there. Make sure it's all out there for parents to see, and it's clear. And then also look for job application, resume, and maybe some other items working with our team. What can we agree on where these are taught, if it's in score, if it's in major clarity, or if it's specific to a particular class, then what is it? And the question becomes, do all students have access to that? And is that going to be a requirement with our portrait of a graduate by the time they leave? And so we're going to put some thought to that and come back to you all with some suggestions.
Thank you. I think that's perfect. And I would just add to that the chronological order for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade that would help answer some of Mr. Side's questions. You know, the chronological order that we're trying to get back to in middle school.
Okay.
You know, I wish there somewhere for a parent's benefit, and I'm not suggesting we go to the part to make, because it's going to take a considerable effort. But if there was somehow a document that had, particularly on these subjects of history, social studies, a timeline from throughout the year, throughout the chronological years of history, the subject matter, and where it's going to be taught. Because it seems to, correct me if I'm wrong, it's kind of, it's pieced up, as we've discovered, in different subjects at different times. So again, I'll go back to my misconception. We're not discussing all these historical revolutions of significance, but yeah, we are, but it's over there. And this one's over here. Well, we'll get to that next year. So but of course the state would never do it that way.
What you're talking
so-
about is maybe a year at a glance.
Exactly. Exactly.
Another thing, based on previous, earlier questions that I think would be helpful to students and parents is to take the high school registration form and look at the electives that we offer in Union County Public Schools. And, outside of this course, here are possible electives that they could take a deeper dive. You might want to consider taking these electives, that semester, next semester, or in their high school career might be a really good thing to connect our registration with. Okay, well, if there are no other comments or questions, I just want to thank everyone here today and this incredible piece of work that you've put together for the first 6 and 9 weeks of school going into these new social studies standards. Our next meeting date, I believe, will be August 19th here at 10 a.m. if necessary.
Action to take this to the full board.
Okay.
For approval.
So I will entertain a motion to send this first grading period to the full board at our August 3rd meeting. If someone will.
Motion to send this curriculum for the first grading period to the full board for the August 3rd meeting on consent agenda.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
So we're going to get 3 more.
Thank you.